All right, I can do the same down here. If I switch to Prussian blue, and I think with the Prussian blue, you should dilute it a little bit. It seems to get very heavy if you use it at full saturation. I'm going to use it a little bit more diluted so you can see the color. Remember to change the angle of your brush when you get to the edges so that you can get a nice clean edge. Now we got to let that dry and then we can move ahead. So I'm going to, I think what I'm going to do is turn this around because it'll be easier to work. And I can cover this other area here so that I can put my hand down. I'm also going to put in some diluted green on the Prussian blue color as well. And since I haven't done this whole thing, I'm just going to go over the whole section. Back to ultramarine, I'm going to do a thin wash of this middle section, test it. Now that this is dry enough. So now I'm going to take this ultramarine and I'm going to mix it with more sap green and test. So I should be able to get a slightly bluer green for my next block. All right, and then we're going to wait and let that dry so we don't blend in edges, and we'll go over to the blue. Now as I'm looking at this, I think I'm going to have to put more green into this particular center block. It's just too blue. So once this dries, I'm going to lift some of this out of here and then put more green into that section. So here we have a little bit of green. I can probably at this point now take my sap green and make it a little bit more blue. More blue than the one next to it. And as you can see, there's a lot of paint on here. So we will eventually lift a lot of that off. I've dried my brush to pick up some of this paint. Alright, so this one's just about done. This one I'm going to fix, which we'll do later. And we will now add a very thin coating of ultramarine. And I'm going to start here where I'm just about dry. Now I'm going to do this in layers, very thin washes. I'm going to go ahead and put in this blue on the top. I'm finding that when you're using ultramarine blue, you're really better off working with it thin and building the layers rather than trying to lay out a darker color right at once. As you can see, this is a little blotchy in here because I did it kind of quickly. But I think that what happens, now this one here, just to show you my swatch, my sample sheet, this is 2 thin layers. Now I can put another layer of ultramarine down here, and I'm going to put another layer on here. And we can eventually get it darker without it getting blotchy. So that's really probably the best way to do this. Okay, so here we're going to add another layer of blue. And here we're going to add another layer of blue. And this tint here is about right for this one. So when I do this next one, I'm going to put another layer of blue here and let it be. Okay, while ultramarine is drying, we're going to work on the Prussian a little bit. First thing we want to do, I'm going to do a tint of Prussian blue here, all the way across. And for these two blocks here, I'm actually going to lift out some of that color because we just want a tint of it. The rest will be just fine. And we wait. All right, so now I'm going to take some sap green and I'm going to paint my strong color here. Sap green, my full saturation. I've dried my brush to pick up some of the moisture in the brush so that we don't have so much paint floating around in this little shape. Okay, so we'll let that dry. And you can actually do all these sap greens at one time if you want to. Okay, so we're going to work on this next section here. So we need mostly Prussian blue with just a little bit of sap green. So put Prussian blue. Again, I recommend that you dilute this a little bit so that you can actually see the color. Well, since we put down some green on here, we're going to just go to Prussian blue and put down a layer of Prussian blue. And actually, I think I'll take it all the way over to the midsection. And then I'll just put the lightest wash of blue into this green section, because we're going to build it up. But we want it to be primarily green. So now we wait. Okay, back to blue, ultramarine blue. So here we need to add more green. So switch palettes so that I'm in the ultramarine palette. And we're going to take we're going to first of all add a little more green to this section here because it does definitely need it. And we're going to add more green where it's already blue. And here we're going to add some blue. Dry enough. Let's add more blue. Okay, let's come back here. So you can work back and forth until you get what you want. So this one now will have green. Switch palettes again. So this one will have green with a smidgen of blue. And this one will have a little bit of green. And we might have to add a little bit more blue to that at some point. So if that's the case, I'm going to go over here and fill two of these with this blue-green color. And we'll put more blue in that one. That looks about right. So wait for this to dry. So everything's a little wet right now, so we need to wait some. So I think our sample is dry now. So I'm going to go back to Prussian blue. And I'm going to start adding a little bit more blue to this layer here. To bring it closer to the actual Prussian blue. And I think I can even go as far as adding all the way over to the midsection. Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sap green now, dilute it way down, test it, and then I'm going to add to the tint section. Let's go back to blue. So we're going to add some green this way. I think I'm even going to add some green over here. And maybe over here. We'll add a center column here. So I'm going to take this color that I have here, and I'm just going to put a little bit of tint onto this section. That's coming along. So this is basically what needs to be done in order to create this chart. There are greens I haven't filled in here yet. But again, if you do it in glazes, thin layers, you can balance these things out pretty well in order to get the color that you want. All right, so there you have it, mixing greens.